Welcome to Beyond the Light, where we talk about the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of medical lighting and medical technology. I'm your host, Lindsay Jankovic. In this episode, I'm joined by Joe Dombrowski, the Vice President of Engineering here at Limitex. Joe leads our engineering team, and he also works directly with customers to integrate light into their devices in ways that are practical, effective, and actually work in real clinical settings. He brings a really unique mix of technical leadership, product development experience, and medical device knowledge. So I'm really excited to dig into what it actually takes to move an idea from early concept into something that can be manufactured and used in the real world. Hi, Joe. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
This is going to be great. Um,
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'd like to start where so many of our products start, which is in R&D.
Hmm.
A lot of medical devices start with a really strong idea and years of development, but bringing that idea to life as a real product takes a lot more. From an engineering standpoint, what goes into making something feasible, scalable, and ready for the real world?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think a lot of people that aren't too familiar with the process think of R&D and picture engineers, kind of playing around with things, trying to make new technology work, and that's a part of it. But when you're part of a business and you're trying to grow new products, trying to make things for customers who come in with ideas, there really is a cross-functional team that's involved. So you have the engineers who are trying to develop the technology, but at the same time, you have to have the project people that are making the goals, making things measurable, and then you have to have the business side too, right? So we can spend a lot of time creating a technology, but if we don't have a market identified, if we don't have a user group identified, that becomes a real challenge, right? A lot of times engineers, left to their own devices will iterate and do things until you let them, right? So it's really important not to just spend a lot of time researching and developing. It's very imperative that you pick your goals. What are you trying to get out of this research, right? If it's a product, what is that product intended to do? Who's the market? Who's the purchaser? Who's going to go and use it? All of those things really need to be identified before you start the R&D, so you actually know what are you trying to develop it, when you're going to go to market, who's going to use it, right? So it is very cross functional. It really just isn't an engineering function.
Yeah, a lot of great lessons learned there and
Yeah.
that we can apply in the future. Yeah. This is something that you and I talk about often. We talk about medical devices keep getting smaller and more advanced.
Mm. Yeah.
How important is it to have optical and lighting systems involved early on in the development process?
Yeah. I'd say very important. As you mentioned, we get approached with a lot of opportunities for very small devices for MIS procedures, for very small access points for surgeries. So, as you can imagine, anytime you're thinking about a medical device that has to be very, very small, generally rule of thumb is it's maybe hard to see, right? So, a lot of our surgical product development revolves around very small incisions. So whatever the procedure is going to be, whatever the surgeon is going to do, their goal is to make a small incision and go address the part of the anatomy that needs addressing. So having some kind of light delivery system for those products is very important. Um, and I would say, in our experience, for sure, the earlier the better. Oftentimes we get approached with companies that are a little bit further down the development path, and then they realize they need to add some lighting, and that becomes a challenge. Um, so yeah, I think the rule of thumb there: the earlier in the process, the better. Lighting is extremely important. It's kind of goes without saying. If you can't see, you really can't do what you need to do. So yeah, that is a big part of what we do every day is helping creator devices and making them smaller and smaller for sure.
Yeah. And then, kind of in the same vein, when you're talking about this, is the manufacturability of it. So there's
Yeah.
got to be a fine balance between pushing that innovation and then being able to actually manufacture the final product. What do you think about that balance?
Yeah, for sure. That's another process that you could add to your original question of R&D, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's certainly one thing to go ahead and develop a device to maybe treat a certain condition, to help with surgery, help with the procedure in an OR. So yeah, thinking about design for manufacturability, that really goes hand in hand with the R&D question as well, right? So we can sit there and create technology, create new products um, for, say, a prototype or a one-off type of device. But if you need to take that same technology or that same device and try to, say, scale it up for maybe a first run alpha launch of 500 pieces, that device may look one way, but then all of a sudden you say to the team, hey, 6 months from now, we got to be able to make 1,000 of those or 10,000 of those, right? That's a very different looking part generally, right? Um, I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier to make a technology for one or two parts, but it certainly looks different, right? You start thinking about automation, you start thinking about labor costs, you start thinking about your supply chain, right? So much like the R&D process scenario, very much for manufacturability, it's very imperative to get those people involved very early in the process, right? People that understand the processes, the manufacturing, the supply chain. So yeah, it definitely goes hand in hand and very much a fundamental part of the development process for sure.
And I know that that is so important to you when you talk to customers. I know that's one of the top things that you talk to them about at the
Yeah,
beginning. Yeah.
yeah.
And now there are even more tools that are entering the process that can change how teams work. I, of course, am talking about AI.
Hmm.
We hear so much
Yeah,
about it changing healthcare, but it's also changing how products are designed and developed.
for sure.
How do you
Yeah,
see that starting to like impact the way medical devices are being created?
yeah, definitely. It's obviously one of those things that's moving so fast and changing every day. There's books and seminars all over being written and done on it. But kind of when I look at our product or our customer base, the markets that we are more familiar with, certainly I think the key things to remember from like a product development standpoint, AI is very beneficial. I would say in our use as an analysis tool, right? We may look at a device that's going to perform certain thing to help a procedure. We could take a look at the different components of that device, put it in an AI model, and ask it to evaluate for things like strength, or maybe we wanted to look at the material and give us some guidance on biocompatibility, or maybe there's a thermal issue that we need to think about, right? So I think when we look at it from that standpoint, it's really beneficial. I'm not sitting here saying it's one of those things that it takes away the engineer's role. It certainly doesn't in my eyes. But I think if used properly, it's a really good tool. With any tool, you still have to sit there and kind of check your work to make sure it's not a perfect model. I think no one's saying it is. But it really does streamline the process. It really does give you just another avenue to kind of check what you have done, get a more comfort level. Let's say before you go into testing, you may use some of these AI tools to get a better understanding of what you developed, will it pass certain emissions, sterility, all of those kinds of things that regulate our industry that we're in. So definitely see that it is a very good assistance tool. With all things, like I said, I think if used properly, it's a good guidance. There's always that I wouldn't rely on it too heavily, because then, like anything, it doesn't replace the knowledge of the engineers and the product developers for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great points. It'll be really interesting to see how this continues to evolve
Yeah, like I said, changes every day.
every day. So, speaking of evolving, I'd like us to look a few years ahead.
Hmm.
What do you see as kind of defining the next generation of medical lighting?
Yeah, I think one of the areas that's pretty intriguing to me that I wouldn't say is new. It's out there a little bit. I think it's ever evolving. But when I think about lighting and medical device, there's all kinds of areas. But one thing with the future and a little bit of AI that I find very interesting is kind of that assisted lighting, let's say in an OR, where um, we know in our industry the position of the light, the temperature, the color, uh, the distribution of the light, the intensity, all of those things are important. But how do you take all of those things in a system and tailor it to that specific user, right? As people just living in the world, we know that, I can turn a light on, it's going to look different to you, it's going to look different to me. I may think it's brighter, you may think it's duller. I may think it looks a little yellow, you may think it looks a little blue. That's just the way our eyes perceive it. So how do you, in a surgery, if I want to create the very exact lighting that's going to help this surgeon perform a procedure, how do I tailor it to that surgeon, right? So a lot of that can be done with AI, right? Through trials and scenarios where that surgeon is picking different things, choosing different angles, maybe adjusting the color, but through a learning kind of phase of different scenarios, that custom light can be tailored so that it's just in tune with that surgeon. So when they're doing a procedure, all of a sudden that light is exactly where they want it. It's exactly the color they need. And by the way, it may be different and tailored to a type of procedure, right? So I think that's a very fascinating area. Like I said, there's some things out there. It's not like it's completely new, but that's an area where I think is ever evolving. And like a lot of things, I think it adds a lot of value, right? Because
Yeah.
there's nothing worse in an OR than wasting time or spending too much time focused on things that are not the actual procedure, right?
Yeah.
So, as you know, we always say with our industry and lighting, the less you know it's there and it's just working, the better off it is. Then we know we've created a great device, right? Because it's just doing its job while you can do yours. So I think this kind of area is kind of like the next level of getting to that perfect lighting in the
Yeah.
medical space. So yeah, I think it's really exciting.
So fascinating. Joe, such a great conversation. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining
thanks.
me.
Yeah, we could probably talk on the subject for hours. So
I know we can. We can get going.
yeah.
So, to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow Beyond the Light for more conversations with the people shaping the future of medical lighting and medical technology. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and keep improving life with light.